Hi, folks. You're with Tacitus Today, your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio radio no pictures live stream. Please listen to this presentation as you would a radio broadcast as you're driving along in your car or your truck, or put in those earbuds and listen to it on public transport. In this essay, I'd like to talk about a flood of media articles that have from the globalist media that have been going out, where it's argued Western nations are being harsh like the Nazis, when they won't take in migrants, particularly ones that arrive illegally or come in on short-term work visas. They won't take in migrants who have disabled family members, disabled children, and so on. Now, the degree of disability is an issue here, but say children or relatives that have lifetime disabilities and serious disabilities, looking at there's a spinal cord difficulty that one of them has here. I'm looking at where it's going to the medical cost of, or the notional medical cost of looking after them is going to be between $10,000 and $20,000 every year for the rest of their lives. And there's no hope. They're not going to be cured or anything like that. This is it. And also the parents will be entitled to special wheelchairs and all sorts of other things. So there's on costs there. So in totality, and the handouts and the so on, and that the woman who's already a low paid worker anyway could get a pension as a carer for the child that pays more than the low paid work. This is so it's going to cost the taxpayer something in the order of $80,000 to $85,000 a year if this child is comes to and stays in Australia or goes anywhere in the West. Now, these media articles argue that the West has a moral obligation to take these handicapped people in, and the moral obligation sort of plays out in a couple of ways. That if you don't do it, then you're the same as Hitler and the eugenics of the Nazi Party. So you're effectively Hitler if you don't do it. But also to realise that the country where these people come from is a poor basket case failed state country, and they don't have the medical facilities or the wealth to be able to provide this child with childcare. So the child's going to probably die instead of living a long life in agony and with permanent medical care. Now, let's have a look at this, because again, it's pitched as it's an either or. You don't do it, you're Hitler. And you're obligated to do it anyway for moral reasons. It's not explained sort of the real reality of why it's required, other than the moral angle, which they toss around like any sort of college kid activist. Now, let's just have a look at some of the examples that are put forward. They like to always personalize examples, and they'll do it in a pathos sort of way. Sula is crying. She is crying, and the table is wet with her tears of grief, because little Sula Jr. Has spina bifida and has been rejected to come to Australia as a migrant. Through tears, Sula tells us about the evil Nazis, and so on and so forth. So they try and pitch it in that direction. There's a picture of some kid. You don't even know if it is the kid concerned. The little girl dressed in pink must be pink. So you know that they've stage managed a photograph there, and in clothes that look, very new. So I'm assuming that the media outlet brought along the pink, the new, very clean, fresh out of the packet type looking clothes. A bit like when they want to cover the Chancellorville exercise in the United States, as a freshly unpacked Nazi flag magically appears just in ready for the cameras. But anyway, we know it's stage managed. So here's the examples now. Here's a couple that comes from a third world country, probably a lower end of the middle countries, maybe would be a better description here. And she is a preschool assistant helper, so you can't get a lower paid, lower skilled job than that. the way the article spins it is that she's really a rocket scientist and they're in huge demand, but that's a lie. He is like an apprentice painter, so both low paid, low skilled jobs. Somehow they ended up getting into Australia. I'm not sure how. The implications suggest they might have arrived illegally or something like that, or they got some short-term temporary work visa that they somehow managed to roll over and renew a few times. Anyway, they decide, rather than go back to the places where they came from, they decide they'll stay in Australia and they'll procreate. And they've clearly done this thinking that the child would then become an Australian citizen, would be an anchor baby. So that will, guarantee them citizenship. They had applied for citizenship and they hadn't got it. This couple, and they were allowed to stay though on a temp work visa, but they decided they'd gamble it. They play their cards. We'll have a baby. That'll give us citizenship. Was their gambit. Turns out the baby is seriously lifetime handicapped, and it's going to cost tens of thousands every year minimum to even keep the child alive. It's not going to have a quality of life. And so their application for citizenship's been rejected on the basis that the child needs special care, and they didn't arrive with the child, so need special care, as in super expensive medical care, and that will go on for its entire life. It's not something where they can have an operation that's fixed. This is it. Now it's supposed to be cruel and outrageous. That these people have been denied a visa because the pretense is that they're both highly skilled migrants in, offering skills that are highly needed, which is untrue. That the only chance the child has for a quality of life is in a first world country. That may be true, but it's still not going to be quality of life. The child is handicapped beyond belief and will always be so. And so their quality of life thing's bullshit. So now the implication is if they go back to the country where they came from, where such medical care isn't available, that the child is effectively going to be euthanized by indirectly and by default. Well, that happens to millions upon millions of people in the third world or poor countries. Does everybody with a handicap have a right to come to a rich white country? I don't know. Do they? What is that moral obligation? It's not explained in the media articles. Just they assert that the moral obligation exists, but don't say why or how, on what basis it does. I mean, you could use everyone has a moral obligation to have a waterfront property, or so. Where does the moral obligation line stop? The next example they use is, and again they omit information. The next is a cousin. So two cousins have married, and as we know, this is from Pakistan or Bangladesh, I think it might be. Anyway, from the subcontinent, cousins have married, and we know that there's an exceptionally high rate of child deformity among cousin marriages, exceptionally high. And there should be laws to prevent it in Australia and the West, I think, in the West, but there isn't. Cousins from these places are allowed to marry and procreate, and then demand that the state pick up the tab for all the medical costs. I don't agree with that. If you engage in a high risk behaviour, such as cousin marriages or procreation in particular, and where there's a very high risk of child deformity, you then can't pass, I believe, you shouldn't be allowed to pass the cost of that to someone else. It's a bad life choice, and that's unfortunate. Now, do you want to have handicapped babies dying? Well, these are the same people that scream that abortion is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But suddenly they're screaming the other direction when it's a handicapped child from a cousin marriage. Oh, no, they should be allowed to. Whereas they're happy for newborn, perfectly healthy newborn babies to be euthanized in this overall abortion debate. So talk about, two-faced here. Now, this couple from Pakistan, they've had, again, a badly handicapped child. Now they're on again another temporary work visa. Fuck, do I know how they got here, but they did. It's not clear whether it's a work visa or it was a temporary visitor visa. I can't really tell from the article, but anyway, a temporary visa, and they decide to procreate. The woman was probably pregnant when they arrived, from the looks of it here. But anyway, let's suppose that whatever it was, the child's born in Australia, and it's badly handicapped. It's going to need a lifetime of very expensive medical care, and Australia is, or the West generally, the rich white countries are heartless Nazis for not taking them in. Now, I don't agree with that. Is it very sad? I mean, we need to sort of just come to grips with this, that the amount of children, cousin marriage children, that are born with the most diabolical handicaps, and handicaps that, and I've seen it up front, by the way, I've seen it right up front, handicaps that you can't even conceive, and I'll come back to that in a moment. They die like flies in these third world countries, always have, always will. Now you can say, well, let's now these third world basket case countries have been third world basket case for thousands of years. It's not like they became basket cases yesterday. So what obligation does the West have? I mean, I can't see it. There's this vague reference to moral obligation, and if you don't do it, you're Hitler and this sort of stuff. But I don't see what the obligation is. Now, as I've travelled around the world in business, there are extremely rich pockets. Like some of the richest people in the world live in some of the most dirt poor basket case third world countries. If you look at the top 100 richest people in the world, 12 of them come from the poorest countries in the world. This idea that they're all poor in these places is not so. There is a very rich, a small but a very rich elite. There's a country like in Indonesia. There's a population of over 200 million there, and it's extremely populous. And there's probably 20,000 people that are very rich there. It's a very small number of people, but they're seriously well off and well to do, and have almost unimaginable wealth. You ought to look at some of their property portfolios in Australia. I mean, mansion upon mansion upon mansion. That's how rich these people are. So one time I was in fact, it was Indonesia, which is a Muslim nation, and cousin marriage is widespread there. And I went out. I had to travel through one place to get to another place, and was driving through an area that had was effectively a small, or not small, I don't know, a township, I'll call it, where the handicapped people lived. And I think it might have been sort of similar to, say, a leper colony of yesteryear, when leprosy was a big thing. But anyways, going through, and I had never seen handicaps, physical handicaps like this. People where their mouth was on the side of their head, and they had no lips, and there were, a jaw that wasn't joined properly, was just hanging down, and people where hands came straight out of elbows or shoulders, and or where they had no backbone, or they had no pelvis, and were crawling around, and you look at this, and if you haven't seen that sort of thing, which for the first time when I hadn't, it was all I could do to not vomit. I'd never seen deformities like this, and you see it close up. And the car had to stop while there was like some oxen or whatever it was were crossing the road, and these handicapped people who can't walk, they're crawling across the ground I don't know what you'd call it. It's like they sort of wriggled like snakes or something, or like amphibians, coming out of the water, and they would crawl across the ground, all coming towards the car. Many of them were blind; they could only hear the noise of the engine, and that they would somehow find a way of climbing up. And I remember one guy was climbing the car, but his wrist was backwards to the arm, so there was the back of the wrist as he clambered up on the car, and he had no pelvis, this guy, and his feet came straight out of his knees, and he was suddenly on the bonnet of the car, and other, others and it was the most eerie sensation. And again, it was all I could do. I wasn't driving. It was all I could do not to vomit. The guy who was driving was a local Indonesian guy, and he was, compared to me at least, very unfazed. He didn't like the idea of them climbing all over the car and so on. And I thought, why didn't he take another route? Was it to show me? Did he want me to see this? And again, it took me days to recover from it. Actually, that sight, the image would come, because you can't unsee those sort of things. The image would come. So this is how it is in the third world, particularly where, in the Muslim societies where cousin marriage is accepted, and you would see it in places, like Bangladesh, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and so on, or in Indonesia, as the example I gave. So, and millions of dialects. So, what obligation does the West have? Like just in Indonesia alone, there are more than 10 million diabolically handicapped children. Should they all come to Australia? Well, why not? It's a moral situation. The people that advocate that it is a moral situation, should they pay for it? Who should pay for it? Should the taxpayer pay? Should taxes be doubled to cover the cost of it? And so on. So there's a lot of practical questions, as well as some vague, abstract moral issue. But this is what the media, the leftist globalist media outlets are arguing, that all these handicapped people should come to the West. And I'd like to know how long the West will remain the wealthy West if ideas like that are entertained or put into practice. You've been a TAS Australia Pushback Channel. Thank you for listening.